This is the website we created and provisioned into ECS in our previous labs. This is a ASP.NET web application. As you refresh, it's doing round-robin load balancing between two containers and giving the container ID as your host ID. So this is a simple application. So what we are going to study in this lesson is how you can do an automatic deployment into ECS and then update this website. Let's say you make some changes to this website. How we can automatically provision that into ECS is what we are going to study in this lab. And as part of that, we are going to do some scripting and do an automatic deployment. So I'm on my ECS cluster. So as of now, there's one service and two tasks running, and there's one EC2 instance back in this cluster. As of now, like these two running tasks do around robin load balancing for my website. The challenge here is that this the task that I'm running, when I run two of these tasks, because it's used 1024 CPU units, once you run two tasks, it's going to consume all the resources of the cluster. So if you go to the cluster, so these two running tasks consumes all the resources. And if I try to do a new deployment, which it needs to start an additional task, it will not have enough resources to start. So as of now, you can find that the CPU available is 0 because I'm running two of these tasks. Because of this, what will happen is the new deployment will kickstart. It will realize that it cannot deploy a new version because it doesn't have enough cluster capacity. And then it will not deploy, but it will just stuck in deployment state. So what I'm going to do is to, instead of running two tasks, I'm going to run only one task in this service. So go to your controller cluster under service. So right now I'm running two tasks. I have given the desired count as 2. Let me run only one task, so that when a new deployment starts, it will have enough cluster capacity to start a new deployment. So update the service. So instead of running two tasks, make it one. If you don't specify this, what will happen is the ECS is going to deploy a new version. It will realize that it cannot even stop all tasks, because if I stop an all task, the minimum health percent is going to go below 50%. So that's why I'm going to specify the number of tasks as 1, so that ECS will have enough cluster capacity to deploy a new version without putting the minimal number of tasks below 50%. So it's going to keep the old version while it is doing the new version, and then slowly decommission the old version. So set the number of tasks to 1. And once you set it to 1, the next step is to update the service. Click next, 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 and then update the service so that the desired count is set to 1. So as of now, the running count is 2, the desired count is 1. What will happen is the ECS should ideally go there and then stop this task. But we are not going to wait until ECS stop these tasks. We can either forcibly stop all these two tasks, and it will spin up a new task because it found that there's a deviation of the running state from the desired state. So what I'm going to do is to go to the controller cluster, go to the one of these tasks, and then stop all of these running containers. So I'm stopping all the containers that is running this website. And ECS will understand that there's a deviation from the desired state. Desired state is to run one task, and it will start a new container that runs the website. So after a while, like once this container starts, there's one task running, and it uses only 1024, and 1024 CPU is available, which we can use in the new deployment. So cluster will have enough capacity for the new deployment. If you go into, so running task is 1. If you go into the service, it's in healthy state. If you refresh the website, it will give you the new container ID, and there's only one container ID back in this website. So let's go there and then explore how to do a new deployment in the next section. I'm in my lab environment. So this is the development machine or the lab environment we created. And your instructor has given you a location of a special PowerShell script in your lab documents. So create a folder in your lab machine, you can give any name. So in this case, I'm going to call it cicd, and copy that special PowerShell script given in your lab document here. So it's called cicd automation. And once you copy it, all the automation tasks are scripted in this PowerShell script. You don't need to be a PowerShell expert to understand how it works. As long as you can read some code, you will understand the content of it. So what we are going to do is to explore the content of this PowerShell script and execute it to do an automatic deployment. So start PowerShell editor as an administrator. You want to start it as an administrator because we are going to build some containers. So select this PowerShell ISE, run it as an administrator. So once that console starts, you need to select the location of your PowerShell script that you copied from the location given in your lab document, browse into that and open it. So let's explore the content of this PowerShell script. I have defined some parameters on top. So let me go through one by one. The first parameter that you find here gives the location of the Visual Studio solution. So if you select the Visual Studio solution that builds your web application, so this is something that we did in our previous labs. If you open the file location, remember that we copied into a location called cd folder. So under that, my web app, you find this my web app .sln file. So that's a Visual Studio solution file. So you need to point this script to that solution file. What this script going to do is to build that solution. You need to give the name of the repo. So if you go into your ECS cluster under repositories, the location we publish this one is called my web app. So this is the repository name. So you need to specify which repository I'm going to publish this image. Then of course you need to tell what's the name of the cluster is. We already know that's my Contoso cluster. Unless you know that, go to your clusters and then select my Contoso cluster. So that's the name of the cluster. So if you go to this my Contoso cluster, that's the name of the cluster. So I specified it there. And then you need to specify the name of the release version of the image. So when MS Build build this task or Visual Studio build this task, it creates an image. So if you type Docker images, you can find the name of the image. So it's called my web app latest. So that's the release name of the container image that Visual Studio or MS Build publish. And then of course you need to give the name of the service. So this is the service name that I'm going to refresh with the new image. So if you go into your cluster, go to my Contoso cluster, and under service we have this my web app service. So that's the name of the service that you are going to refresh with the new image or with the new deployment. So copy that my web app service name. So that's what you need to fill. If you have used a different name, you can put it here. So these are some helper function that I use to log some information into the console. You log some information and the errors. And then I specify if something bad happens, just stop the whole script. I then give the full location of my solution file. So this will be used in the MS Build to build the solution. So if you go into this location, it gives the tool location of the MS Build file. So when you install Visual Studio or MS Build tools, it installs some exe files. So one of these exe files is called MS Build. In your build machine, usually you don't install the whole Visual Studio. Sometimes you need to. But if you don't have, so I'm going to use this ms build to build the solution. So it verifies whether it done, and then I'm going to execute this ms build with my solution as a solution file name as a parameter, and I'm going to build the solution, and the release I'm going to build is the release version. So you have like two versions here, like you can do a release build or a debug build. I'm going to make a release build. We already did a release build using Visual Studio manually, but in this case I'm going to do it automatically using the script. So, and then I'm going to check whether there is a repository with the repo name. If I don't have one, I'm going to create a one. This is where I create a one. So remember that in the repository, I have one called my web app. So I check whether that repository exists. If I don't have it, I'm going to create a one. So of course you need to have permissions to create a one for this machine IAM role if you don't have it. Finally, I verify whether the repo creation is successful or not. If it is successful, I'm good to go for the next step. Obviously, the next step is to tag the my local image name with the full URL of the repository. So we already did in this kind of tagging in our previous section. So if you type Docker images, you can find the one that Visual Studio build is my web app latest, or that's what ms build is going to build. But I want to have the full URL of my repository as given on above one to fully qualify the URL of the repository so that I can publish that image. So once I do that tagging, the next step, of course, is to identify the region of the repository. I can either hard code it, but in this case, what I'm going to do is to identify the region based on my development machine region. So I look at some metadata of this development machine and then look for the region of the development machine and then pass it to the login command of ECS. So if you look at this repository is based in Sydney region. So if your repository is in a different region, of course you can hard code that region here. But I'm in this case identified with the help of my build machine or my EC2 instance that I'm running this script. So, and then I finally call docker push with the full URL of the repository to image to publish that one into this repository. So as of now, once it publish a new version, you will get the latest version. So I publish it several times, and that's why you find that several versions here. And here you have the latest version of my web application. So once you have this latest version, latest version on ECR, I'm going to tell ECS, hey, go there and refresh. I give all the parameters, things like the service name, min count, max count, the health percentages, and I'm do a force deployment after that, so that ECS, the service, is going to refresh it with the latest version. So that's how you publish this image using Amazon ECS service. So because this is the latest version, I only need to refresh the service. If you go to the task definition, my web app task, and go into this web app task, this task is configured to use the latest version. So I don't need to modify this task because it's anyway configured to use the latest version. So you don't need to write any code to refresh this task definition. For example, let's go into and then modify this to show you where I have specified the latest version of the image as the container definition. So you can find that when I define the image, I use the latest version. So it's already going to use the latest version if I refresh the service. So no need to update this task in your script. If you go to the cluster, the service is also defined to use the task definition. So if the task definition is the latest one, you don't need to update the service. So you can find that service requires my task definition. It's going to use the latest task definition. And my latest task definition refers to the latest image. So no need to go there and then modify this part of the service. But of course, you need to tell the service to refresh it. So that's what we are doing in our script. So if you go to the deployments, what will happen is, so right now this is the primary deployment that is running on this cluster. When you deploy a new one, it's going to spin up. So when you call this one, this refresh service PowerShell command, it's going to create a new deployment, and you will see actually a new deployment appearing here that will deploy the new version of the image. So if you go to EC2 and then go to your load balancer that is back in this website, you can find that it has these listeners configured, and under, if you go to the targets for this, we can go like this and select the target group. So under target, so it's running this under this port. So what will happen is when the new deployment comes into picture, the load balancer, once the new deployed container is healthy, it's going to slowly decommission this old container. So we already saw this one in a quick demo that we did prior to this lab. So right now we are showcasing you how to script it and then do that deployment. So what we are going to do now is to execute this script and then see how the automatic deployment is going to work. Of course, you can either click this play button, or you can start PowerShell and then run the script from PowerShell. So either way, you can start this script. Before starting any deployment, I want to showcase you certain places that you need to look carefully when this deployment is going to happen. So go to your clusters under Contour cluster, under service, under service deployments. Keep that tab open so that when a new deployment is happening, you can observe what is happening behind the scenes. So keep this window open in a one browser window. And also under EC2 instances, so if you go to your EC2, go to your load balancing section, and under target groups, select the target group for the load balancer that uses in this website, and keep the target tab open. You can find that right now there's one container running and it's in the healthy state. So that's the container that is backing the website. And also open the website itself. So you now have 3 tabs open in your browser. So when the deployment is happening, you can go and then observe what is happening behind the scene. So let's click this play button and then start the script. Obviously, you can start the script from PowerShell itself. Do a bit of zoom up because during this script execution, it's going to print a lot of things into the screen. So I'm going to execute this script. Make sure that you have configured your parameters to suit your environment. So let's play this or start the script. What will happen is it's going to build the solution. So this is MS build getting executed. It's going to build the image. And once the image is built, it's going to log in into ECR and then publish the layers. So all these steps that we did manually is now getting executed through a script. So if you go into the screens that I asked you to open, if you go to the deployment section, you can find that a new deployment is in place. Run count is 0. At some point in time, it's going to start a new container. It can start a new container because the cluster has enough resources. And if you go to the load balancing section and refresh it, so the new container is at initial state. At some point in time, it will become healthy, and the old container is going to go into the draining state. So keep refreshing. So once the new container or the task become healthy and all the load balancer health check passes, the load balancer is going to direct traffic into the new container. Keep refreshing. So as of now, the new container is in initial state. Now it became healthy and the old one is in draining state. So new container is healthy, old one is in draining state. So if you go into your browser window and look at the website, you should see the latest version. So once it becomes healthy, you can refresh this the image, so your browser of the website, and you get the new website published. So as you can see that it's running under a new container ID. So here we didn't make any modification. So let's make some modification into this website. Open Visual Studio as as an administrator. Like before, open the solution. The solution location is wherever you copied it. So it should be under div. So this is the solution file. So once you open this solution, if you go into the views and then the home section, and there's in the index file, this is where you are getting the text that you observed on the website. So to simulate a developer making a change, so I'm adding some new text here. So this is, imagine that you are releasing a new feature because you found a new bug. Maybe you don't like the message on that website. So remember to save this file. It's super important. And what the developer is going to do in a normal circumstance is going to commit this. And whatever the build system behind the scene is going to pick up these changes that you submitted to the source control system and then build it. We don't have it because we are not going to study all these different types of source control system and continuous integration system. So for the moment, we save it local machine, and we are going to simulate a build execution of a build task by executing our PowerShell. So we save this, make sure that you save this file. And because we have now automated it, we don't need to do any of the updates manually. All what we need to do is to run the script. So to run the script, like before, either you can run it through PowerShell. So observe now, this is the old version. So when we run the script, it's going to build the solution file. So these are MS build steps execution. And make sure that you save the file, super important. It's going to publish an image, then push the layers, only the delta changes are published. And if you refresh it, you can find the new deployment is in place. So as of now, it's the new deployment. It will not start because it doesn't have enough resources in the cluster. So at least one of these old deployment has to stop. So hopefully the oldest one will get terminated at some point. So refresh this at some point in time. Once the draining old one terminates, cluster will have enough capacity, and the new deployment can start a new container. So as of now, there's a 3. So the new one doesn't have enough cluster resources. So you need to wait a bit until the oldest one terminates. So right now it's in good condition. The oldest one terminates. You need to leave some time. Of course, with the magic of video editing, I fast forward it. So now the you again have an initial version, which is the version we just published. At some point in time, this newest version is going to be healthy. If you go into your repository, you can find that the new version of the image is published. So this is the latest image. And you can find like over time, you will get different versions. Keep refreshing. Once the initial stage of the container becomes healthy, the load balancer is going to direct traffic. So if you refresh this web application, you can find that the version 2 of the application is now appearing as the latest version. So the users will not feel any downtime. It's a very seamless deployment of the new application. So at some point in time, the old deployments appearing here will vanish, and the latest deployment will be the deployment that is in place. So what we observed here is how easily you can deploy an application and do the automation. You don't need to know all the build systems. As long as you know how to script using PowerShell, you can easily integrate with any other build system.